Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent podcast. Today, we are sitting with Megan Carney. Megan is a psychologist who navigates deep feelings and beliefs with persistent, kind, smart, caring people who need support offering that kindness to themselves. She nudges them to dive deep without pushing them off the cliff so that they can cultivate better relationships, stop pushing aside their own needs, and enjoy life. Megan, thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me, Marissa.
All right, so we'll start with the typical two. I'm curious, number one of the typical two. Megan, how do you define the term codependency?
Yeah. So I don't define it the way the DSM does. I'm a little less pathologizing than that, I would say. To me, we all have some codependency. And so codependency just looks like giving so much of ourselves and taking care of others so much that it harms us.
Right. How does it harm us?
It can harm us in so many different ways that we're not even aware of. So it can harm us by making us put ourselves last. So, for example, I'm a mom, and when you have a kid, something different happens where you put them first. And for me, it ended up being very much to the detriment of myself. Like even my health, like my doctor's appointments, I was putting off because I was like, when am I going to have time for those?
Wow.
Because we're so focused on another person.
Right. I actually just aired an episode today where I just went through a very busy season. So I reflected on the 10 ways codependents tend to respond when life gets busy. And one of them was, she misses or cancels her appointments.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Or just doesn't even make them.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it can harm us that way, right? Neglecting our own physical health, emotional health, relational health, etc.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on ways that giving so much of ourselves, it can harm us?
Yeah. So as a professional, I've found that like it can actually harm us professionally, especially as entrepreneurs, if we're putting other things first and scheduling everything else first. I recently listened to your calendar episode and I was like, that's a year ago me. I used to do that. So it can harm us in achieving our goals professionally and personally. Also emotionally, it harms us. Like it's draining to always put somebody else first and not take care of your own emotional needs or even recognize what your emotional needs are.
Yeah. So going back to your definition, I think I have it right, but giving so much of ourselves that it harms us.
Yeah.
All right. And any other thoughts on that? Giving so much of ourselves that it harms us.
I would just say that it's not the giving that's bad, right? We can all
Right.
find ways to give in our lives, but when we're giving and giving and giving to the point that there's nothing left, that's when it gets harmful.
Mm-hmm. Right. So giving of ourselves. Hello, humanity.
Right.
But giving so much of ourselves that it harms us. Hello, codependency.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think a theme on the podcast has been just codependents tend to live in the extreme, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the extreme form of giving that leads to extreme harm. Yeah. But we live in that as if it's normal when we're actually.
It doesn't necessarily feel like you're harming yourself until something reflects it back to you that you're like, oh, you have to kind of take that gut check.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Something, yeah, has to reflect it back, or it it it's not sustainable, but it can be maintained for a time.
It can.
Yeah.
Until we
Okay.
burn out, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what happens.
Right. Well, I'm curious, Megan, if you have a codependent experience or relationship in your own life that you can share with us.
I probably have a lot of them. But one that I became aware of more as a therapist and working on myself and my business, because working on your business really makes you work on yourself, um, was just how much I cater to making sure that everyone else is happy and comfortable and not going to get mad at me, or reject me in some way. That I was overthinking every little piece.
Mm.
I was overthinking, when do I schedule clients? How much do I charge them? Who should I see and not see? How should I see them? When should I see them? Where should I see them? How should I put myself out there so these people can find me? It was all catering to them
Mm-hmm.
and their needs rather than myself and the needs of myself and my business.
Right.
Which is how this stuff first got reflected back to me, was business.
Wow. And when you were in it, I'm curious if you have a specific example. I loved what you said. Something has to reflect it back, where it was just really in your face and you realized, holy shit, this is completely them centric.
Yeah. So I live in Idaho, and in the court process here, there's something called a parenting timeout evaluation when parents are in a really bitter custody divorce and they need a psychologist or other mental health professional to come in and evaluate the whole thing.
Wow.
Everybody. Like, it's really deep and intensive. Um, and so that was just a need that was in the community when I moved here. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have the skills to do that. I can do
Mm-hmm.
that. I didn't really think too much of it. I got supervision and started doing these cases. And it got to the point that I was laying in bed at night, literally like drafting what I was going to say in the report in my head, could not fall asleep,
Mm.
making these really big decisions that I didn't feel comfortable making. And in the meantime, like, to be able to have all the information to make those decisions, I was driving all over the place at any hour that would work for this highly contentious separated family,
Mm.
and running myself ragged while having just moved to a new state, new community, no support system,
Mm.
and having a 3-year-old kiddo.
Wow.
And it took a lot. It took all of that for me to be like, whoa, I need to take a step back. I need to stop doing this. I need to figure out what I want to do because I know it's not this.
Wow. So, right, new city, new state, toddler, new potential role as a parent timeout psychologist. But yeah, giving so much of yourself that it did harm you, right? So driving out all hours, running
Yeah.
yourself ragged,
Yeah.
not being able to sleep. Did you want to add something?
Well, I was gonna say, like, so in addition to the work things of, working ridiculous hours, not charging enough for what my family needed, I was also parenting, right? A toddler who had a lot of energy and her own challenges herself with no support system. So I was giving myself in that way. My spouse was working full time. So I was taking care of more of the household stuff than I traditionally had been. So I was giving of myself more in that way. And so it was just give, 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 give. And there was no receiving or very little receiving because I had such small support system and because I wasn't doing a great job of making time for myself to do what I needed to feel good.
Wow. Yeah. So lots of harm.
Yeah.
What happened when that something reflected back?
For me, when it reflected back, it was kind of a wake-up call. I was like, wow, I really need to start making some changes. And I'm a problem solver. So I was like, I'm going to solve these problems myself. And so I problem solved my way out of it. Right? How am I not going to burn out? How am I going to get more help? How am I going to change things so that I can keep doing some of the things that I want to do? And I got to a pretty good place actually, just through listening to myself and what I needed at the time and problem solving. But then COVID happened.
Wow.
And so that just brought in a whole new wave of like, oh, I was taking care of myself like just enough to not burn out. But I actually really need more.
Right. You're making me think of this graphic I've seen before, which I sense it's about healing for everyone, but our healing journeys, they're really more like swirls. Right. And the hope is that we slowly swirl up. But yeah, we tend to problem solve like you did. And then we're faced with a stressor like coronavirus or a baby or a move. And then we go back down and then start to see the familiar or feel like, oh, this is familiar somehow. And yeah, the hope is that somehow you're able to, helping yourself and getting help. Swirl up.
Yeah. As you say that, it reminds me like every time I've initiated therapy for myself, because I think it's great for us as therapists to be getting therapy when we need it.
Yeah.
And every time I have initiated, almost every time, it has been a boundary issue that I didn't even realize was happening.
What was the boundary issue during
I could feel
COVID?
things.
Yeah.
The boundary issue during COVID was there was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, first, like, we're keeping our family safe because there are people in my family who have weaker immune systems, and we didn't know what was going on. So we're like, we're just gonna be safe. So
Right.
we all crammed in our house, which frankly was not big enough for all of us. And worked from home, turned the little bit of extra room that we had into an office. We were sharing that, my spouse and and I like to be neat and orderly and have everything in place. That's not his style. And so maybe a week or two into working from home, I just broke down in tears to him, and I was like,
Sorry, cut out your what?
Oh, I broke down in tears to him, and I said, I need my own space.
Yeah.
Which he graciously heard and created an office for himself out in the garage so I could have my own space. But that was just one example of me being able to like recognize and set the boundary, but not until it was like at the very end of my limit.
Right. Bursting into tears, like kind of like forced into like a corner, and then you're finally able to recognize it.
Yes. Yes. Because I am a person who's really good at shoving down their own feelings.
Yeah. You and me both. I think our listeners.
Right? Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm curious, shifting the focus to your clinical work.
Yeah.
Yeah, in prepping for today and even in your bio, you talked about diving deeper without pushing people off cliffs. I love that language. How come codependents find it hard, and I did add, or nearly impossible to dive deep within themselves?
I think there's a few reasons for it. One is that like we have often never learned how to do it. Like we've never gotten that feedback to feel our own feelings.
Right.
Or the message that it's a good thing for us to listen to our feelings. So we don't have any practice with it. That just makes it like hard and challenging. And then because it's hard and challenging, we tend to avoid it. And I often say like avoidance works really, really great until it doesn't work anymore. Eventually that shit is going to explode. Like me crying to my spouse about needing more space. And the third reason I think is because it's scary, right? If we don't have practice with it, if we've never been given feedback that it's a good thing to show or feel or experience your emotions rather than hide them, then it can be really scary to be experiencing them in yourself, especially when on the other side of things, like we're trying to keep people happy, right? We don't want the bad feelings.
Right. So a couple reasons. We've never learned how, because it's inherently hard and challenging to dive deep within. It's scary. And you didn't list this, but yeah, like we're busy arguably helping others dive deeper.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I know we're busy helping, but yeah, I think a lot of the time, one thing that my patients tend to have in common, the listeners tend to have in common, is they do describe themselves as their friend's therapists, or their boyfriend's therapist, or their family's therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's super common. It's way easier to manage other people's feelings and help them feel better because that makes us feel good, right? And we don't have to deal with our own shit.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes a ton of sense to me. And I mean, I was the same. Like in high school, I was in the peer mediator program. Like I've always been the problem solver.
Mm. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of the book. I forget her name too. It's like Jeanette McCurdy. She was the iCarly actress.
Yes.
And I haven't listened to the book yet. I plan to. I think there's a lot of codependent themes in there, but I fell upon an interview with her. I liked it so much. I listened to another interview. I might have listened to like 3. And I was listening and observing how like subtly and covertly, stealthily, she turns the interview where the host is opening up so much about themselves. Yeah, they're talking, they're trying to share an anecdote that they will then provide a question for her.
Yeah.
And she's like, wow, that's really interesting. What is that like for you? And I'm like, oh my God, like it was something that really stood out to me. But yeah, here are these hosts trying to dive deeper with her, and she's really diving deeper with them.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if you listened to her on Maya and Bialik's podcast. I'm pretty sure she's on there. But that tends to happen on that podcast too. The people bring out her stuff more.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm gonna try not to do that today. So yeah, I'm curious just for you to expand on any of these reasons it's hard to dive deep within ourselves. We never learn how, it's inherently hard and challenging, it's scary, or we're busy, helping others dive deeper, like Jeanette.
Yeah, I think honestly it comes down to whether we realize it or not. Like we're avoiding it in ourselves, right? Like we're scared of or afraid of what that means, of what certain feelings might be trying to tell us.
Right.
Of what it would mean if we actually like listened to our feelings and said no sometimes. What would that mean? Does that lead to rejection? And what would that mean if we are rejected?
Right.
Right. So, I mean, the part of us that is avoiding going deep is doing it for a really good reason. Right. Like our system is trying to protect ourselves in some way.
Right. So we are avoiding. And we say that with like compassion. Like we're avoiding.
Yeah.
Not we're cowardly avoiders.
No, it's of course we're avoiding. This is scary, potentially painful shit.
I want to have a tickle. Okay, I have tea. Let's take a water break, everybody.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah. The foundation that our codependency is built on, our like lack of diving deep. We'll say lack of diving deep. It is built on a foundation that, we never learned how. True. It is inherently hard and challenging. True. But yeah, this part about it being scary, I sense that really gets to the core because as young women, right, my patients, my listeners, They may not have learned how, but they're also 25 and they're starting therapy, and they are starting to discover the tools to know how, right? But even if they have the tools, maybe they start therapy and stop. Maybe they, I don't know. I know even in therapy, sometimes like I've focused on an issue while there's something glaringly wrong. There's something else in my life that is wrong, but I just don't mention it. I'm like, yeah, let's keep doing these skills.
Yeah.
And so then, at the core of it, despite exposure to the tools, despite being able to access the help, sometimes people can't. That's true. But even when we are able to, because it's so scary.
Yeah. Well, even in therapy with a therapist that is willing to, nudge you a little bit and help you process those emotions, like if you don't start off with an honest exploration of how you feel about even being in therapy, like you might not get to what you really need to get to. You might not get to that good stuff.
Say more about that.
So what I've found is my clients who make the most progress are the ones who, when I ask in that first session, like, how are you feeling about therapy with me? And the ones who just kind of brush it off, they're like, oh, like I feel pretty good about it. If I let them brush it off, which depending on where they are, we might, then their progress is a lot slower. Or they'll make progress on something, but I sense that there's something deeper, or I see a deeper pattern that they're just not ready to get to yet. And that's okay. I can help them where they are. But the ones who say, like, there's a part of me that's really nervous about what's going to happen here, and allows us to explore what they're nervous about, why they're nervous. Those are the people who are really able to go deeper and make the lasting, lifelong changes and feel just like weight off of their shoulders by the time that we're done with therapy. They're like a whole new human.
Right. How do we get there before therapy even starts?
For me, I can speak to my experience, and I don't know if it'll work for everyone. For me, it started with very, very gentle meditation. So there used to be an app called the Shine app, and they merged, I believe, with Headspace. And they just had a daily meditation that I would use every morning just to start getting in touch with what am I actually feeling every day? What is my body? What's my body telling me? What are my thoughts telling me? What are my emotions telling me? That's a really nice way when you're not ready for therapy to ease into just knowing what's going on with you.
Right. Yeah. And just to clarify, I don't mean like if someone isn't ready for therapy, but how I love this to help cultivate the awareness of your emotions when you do start therapy, which likely will be nervousness, dread, terror. Oh my God, what's this therapist gonna do to me in my life?
Right.
It could be radical. It could be, you really could be going to therapy unconsciously seeking a radical change.
Yeah.
Or maybe even consciously, but that in and of itself mandates a lot of work. So yeah, so likely you're like, when my patients arrive and I ask them how they're feeling and they say, I'm nervous, that's a promising sign for I don't want to say quicker, I'm trying to think of the word, but just like, oh God, I can't think of the word, but less avoidance.
And because of that, deeper transformation.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so meditating, just in general, even if you're in therapy now, but you really sense that this Shine app helped you get in touch with your thoughts, your feelings, your body, etc.
Yeah. Other things that are helpful for me are yoga, and like finding the right yoga class and right yoga community for you, because they're all a little bit different. Some are way more health centric, some are more mental health centric. And what I need is a place that's more mental health centric. That's been super helpful. For some people, writing, like journaling, is super helpful, or even writing poetry in a way that helps them get their feelings out.
Yeah.
There's lots of strategies we can use. We've just got to experiment with what works for us.
So yeah, for the it's scary part. And then okay, next question. What about codependency contributes to our difficulty in trusting ourselves?
I think one part of it is that we really lack confidence. And some of that is because like we don't even really know ourselves that well, because we've been so busy focusing on other people and not diving deep, not looking at what our own feelings are telling us. And so we do things like Brene Brown refers to polling, right? Like polling other people for what should we do?
Right.
Because we don't have that confidence. We don't really know for ourselves because we don't really know ourselves.
Right.
Right. And it's hard to feel good enough when you don't know yourself well.
Other ways codependency contributes to our inability to trust ourselves.
For me, it's just like I see detachment between what we need and what other people need, and not seeing that what we need also matters. And that makes any decision about ourselves harder.
Right.
Because we're so wanting to put what other people need first.
Right. Other thoughts on our inability to trust ourselves?
I think there's a piece of this that has to do with feeling like we need some approval.
Right.
Right. To be accepted, or to have other people on our side, and saying that the decision that we're making is the right one. Because again, like we don't know.
Yeah. All right. So difficult to trust ourselves
Mhm.
because we lack confidence. We don't know ourselves. Right. This detachment, disconnection between what we need versus what others need,
Mhm.
and just really focusing on others.
Mhm.
And then, feeling like we need approval. So when we're making decisions, that's a lot to hold.
It is, right? And then you're making the decision wondering if it's right for you and these other people that you're considering, not simply for yourself.
I know, especially in my 20s. I mean, even like growing up, it was harder for me to make decisions at times because I did have what's my dad gonna think in the background. Sometimes it was more trivial. And then other times, I remember like taking my car to a mechanic that I found on my own. Because he really had helped me purchase my first car, like taught me to drive, reminded me, it's time to get an oil change. Go to Lee. Did you call Lee? And the first time I went somewhere else, and I vividly remember, Megan, just being anxiety ridden, finding the place, making the appointment, choosing what type of oil I needed to get, Googling which type of oil, and worried that I would, share this and face disapproval. So I'm curious, like, do you sense that for codependents, that need for approval, does it often come from families, from friends? Like, where do you sense that starts to develop?
I think it depends on your story.
True.
Right? So nobody has to have done anything wrong per se to you, or you need to have experienced some like major trauma for codependence to develop, right? It's just, were you accepted enough for who you are, not somebody who's putting on a mask, to feel confident enough in yourself to make those decisions.
Right.
Right. And so for some people, that might have happened within their family, that unless they were fixing things, they didn't feel like they got enough approval or enough attention. For other people, it could be that didn't come up until they started making friends and getting to, that age where the kids start rejecting you because maybe you don't fit in for whatever reason, or they just decide that you're the one that they're going to pick on.
Right. So it does depend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with your clients, right, we did touch on some ways that you do help them start to build awareness of their emotions, their thoughts, their bodies. I'm curious. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, Siri. Just tuning in.
Siri's curious too.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand. How do you help your clients start to dive deep within themselves, start to trust themselves? Yeah, you already mentioned ways to feel good, but with the codependence, where do you start?
Yeah. So for me, I find that the process of therapy that I use helps people develop more confidence in themselves. So I'm an IFS informed therapist.
What's IFS?
IFS, because we love our acronyms, is internal family systems, which sounds weird. It sounds like it would be family therapy, but it's not. It's only named that because the person who developed it was trained as a family therapist. And so that's sort of the framework that he was working from. But it's really this idea that we have all of these different parts inside of us from different experiences that we've had. And if you're codependent, you've probably spent a lot of time trying to tune some of those parts out. And this process of internal family systems therapy really helps us create space to listen to those parts, to listen to these beliefs that might always be running out in the background, to listen to these feelings that are going on within us. And as we're able to do that and like understand why these aspects of ourselves exist, we can get a lot deeper and find some hidden things that really hurt us that we didn't even realize caused as much problems as they've caused in our lives.
Right. What parts are we tuned into in our codependency?
Yeah. I think as codependents, we're tuned in very well to the parts that protect us from being rejected.
Right.
Right? So the problem solver, the people pleaser, right? All of these aspects of ourselves that keep everyone else happy and happy with us.
Right. Other thoughts on our initial steps integrating IFS with your codependent clients?
I think for a lot of people, like it's a new approach to them. Like even if they've been in therapy before, like I've had people tell me like I could CBT myself all day. And that's going to change what's in here maybe, but it's not going to change what's in here. And so a lot of them are up here. They have really strong analytical parts, are really thinking a lot. And giving space to that while also making room for the feelings that go along with what's in there really, really helps. Because it's not, I was going to say, because like in CBT and like nothing against CBT, that's what I was trained in originally, and it can be very helpful. But I found that oftentimes it gets to a point where it can invalidate your feelings because you're trying to convince yourself that something else is true and not listening to the feelings. And so this process lets you change your thoughts and your feelings because you're giving space to both of those things.
Right. Giving space. And I know I use some language in my practice on the podcast. I talk about part of me. I know too. I don't know if I've said like the codependent part of me, but yeah, I know that I've had interactions that have been difficult, and I'm like, the codependent part of me just wants to let this go, right? To avoid the conflict. And then the mature, wise, assertive adult part of me wants to say no.
Yeah.
Is that the type of language that you introduce to your patients?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very patient-led, actually. So parts show up in different ways for different people.
Right.
And we all name them differently. We all experience them differently. So it's just really getting it in tune with what is coming up for the person, whether that's a thought, a feeling, a memory, a visual,
Right.
and giving attention to that.
And Megan, how do you find using that type of language really helps people get in touch with their feelings? Because I think I know in my experience, sometimes I'm like, part of me is angry. And the other part of me is really disappointed. So I'm not just like pissed. I get to tap into the complexity that is an emotional response. So your thoughts on how empowering that is.
I think it's super empowering because it really reinforces the fact that we are not just our emotions. Right? And it's normal to have competing, conflicting emotions that are even like in a tug of war with each other. And want totally opposite things. Like sometimes, let's take something really simple. Sometimes we really have a part of us that wants to eat the entire bag of chocolate.
Yes.
And at the same time, have another part of us that is like, you do not want to eat even a single bite of that chocolate right now.
No.
Right? No. And so using this language just really normalizes that we get to have all of these different feelings and they're all valid. Like that doesn't mean one is right or wrong. And this process empowers us to have choice of what we're listening to internally, of what decision we're going to make based on what's currently happening, what we really actually need or want.
Yeah, choice. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's such a powerful perspective. And I really do hope for the listener. I know I have used this language in episodes. Megan does use this language, this framework in her work with patients. And it just again, it helps us get into the complexity of our emotions, work through them, and then make choices, based on all the parts, as opposed to just homing in on if I really want the whole bag, part of me is like, no, like that's a terrible idea. Then it's like, okay, like a square, like you can find like the middle ground rather than just making decisions based on like one extreme part of you.
You're eating the Ghirardelli chocolates like me.
I love dark chocolate. All right.
Me too.
So going back to other ways you mentioned earlier, so apps like the Shine app, which is now with Headspace, yoga, journaling, poetry, movement. Well, like yoga. You really appreciate what the process of IFS can do for your patients, including those dealing with codependency. Other thoughts on how you start building that self-trust, diving deep, feeling good for your patients?
I think it's really about helping them listen to themselves. right? So from the very start, noticing what's showing up in their body. So like muscle tension, headaches, butterflies in their stomach, things like that. And then not just waving it off, paying attention to those things and noticing what happens when we pay attention. What other thoughts or feelings come up with that? And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying like making the space for things. We're going to do that with whatever feelings come up too, right? We're not just going to brush it aside and say, oh, that doesn't matter. Oh, there's more important things or other people to get to. We're going to take that time to really focus on what our body, our mind, our feelings are telling us.
That sounds amazing and also really hard.
It is. It's both. Like I have an IFS therapist myself, and yeah, some days it's hard, and other days at the end I'm like, oh, I'm so glad we did that. Like, it feels so much better.
Right. For those of you listening, you're missing out on Megan has repeatedly put her hand on her chest. Right. But I mean, talk about like modeling, like here you are, like responding to questions throughout the interview. And you just keep really like, I don't know, like tapping into yourself, tuning into your heart center. So maybe we can all practice that this week. Just some love taps to the heart.
Yeah. And I would say like I am one of those people who, gosh, 3-5 years ago, like this all would have sounded like woo to me. And like, no, let me logic my way out of this. And so wherever you're at, like that's where you're at, and that's okay. And as long as we are patient with ourselves and take our own journey, we'll get there.
Yeah, we will. All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan. This was amazing.
You're welcome, Marissa.
I'm curious if this is resonating, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah. The best place for people to find me is at my website, which is meganscarney.com. And
what's the S for?
The S is my maiden name, which is now my middle name, which was straw sign. So if you ever meet a straw sign, you are probably related to me, and I can't be your therapist.
Very nice. I cut you off. You said something about your website.
Oh, yeah, that's the best place to find me. So that's meganscarney.com.
Awesome. Okay, I will put a link to that in the show note. And everyone curious about Megan, please go there and practice patience, hand on your chest, and trying to use this part language.
Yeah.
Right. Any other final thoughts?
I would just add, like, one thing we didn't get to touch on was this like feeling good enough about ourselves aspect, which is a part of ourselves. And there are lots of reasons for that, including like the rejection stuff that I talked about, not fitting in, but also wearing a mask. Like if you are part of any marginalized community, there's a good chance, I'd bet on it, that there are spaces where you have to put a mask on to be safe and to feel safe.
Right.
And that can end up looking like codependency because you have genuinely needed to protect yourself because of some other aspect of your identity, whether that's like a disability like being autistic, or because of your race or your gender or your language, depending on the environment that you're in, like that is a big aspect for a lot of people of why we don't feel good enough, why we need to take care of other people, why we need acceptance, because there is a level of safety there that hasn't been achieved.
Mm-hmm. So acknowledging how, being marginalized can contribute to needing a mask and thus mimic or really start to turn into codependency.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And being in therapy for the codependent aspect of it doesn't mean that like your therapist is going to make you take your mask off when it's not safe.
Mm-hmm. Right. Keep it on, and it can just be like a superhero mask for good at times.
Or it can be a protective mask that you just need for the moment, and you still know internally like what are the changes that you might need to make to continue to get safer and safer and safer, and for us, our community, our world, to take steps to make everything safer and safer and safer for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sorry, everybody. I forgot to ask Megan about feeling good enough. So we added that at the end.
Yeah.
And now we'll end. So Megan's website will be in the show notes. And we thank you all for being here. And we will see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Marissa. Obviously, I could talk forever about this. So
yeah, me too. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please